The aim of this slideshow is to talk about how Thomas Aquinas established the precepts via the use of reason. Now, any question in an exam could be asked on this directly. They have in the past asked specifically for the precepts. So you need to know what they are, examples of them, how they're established, and how they are applied. Now, you know that rector ratio or right reason is part of our conscience. We've discussed this before, and it is vital within natural law. We know that it's influenced by Aristotle's form of reasoning, which is very systematic, and so Aquinas has used Aristotle's ideas to establish the idea of final cause or purpose in human life. Now, according to Aquinas, then, reason is right if it's in accordance with divine and eternal law. It must be used in accordance with these higher levels of law, or it is not right reason. It would be wrong. And only humans have this, because only humans are made in the image of God. This is demonstrated in divine law in the Bible, in Genesis, at the moment of creation. And so it's God's gift to humanity. It's the thing that he has given us to make us unique and to establish that special relationship with us. So according to Aquinas then, the Bible and reason demonstrate that our purpose is to do good and avoid evil, to re-establish a right relationship with God. Now, the Bible shows us that God made us for a relationship with him. It demonstrates that in Genesis. And since Genesis also shows us how that relationship is damaged within the fall, our purpose must be to work or strive towards a re-establishment of that relationship for which God created us. Now, what we have to remember about the primary precepts is that there are 5 absolute rules. These 5 primary precepts cannot be broken under any circumstances. They are consistent with the laws in the Bible. They are consistent with eternal law, the laws of creation. And these will help us to achieve our purpose if we obey them. Now, they can be remembered via an acronym, which I'm going to go through in just a minute. But we know that these 5 primary precepts are reasonable. They are supported by our reason, as well as the Bible. Aquinas didn't expect us just to blindly follow the Bible without using our brains. God has given us brains, but at the same time, we can check that reasoning in accordance with the laws God has given us. And so if we follow them, we know that we will achieve the purpose of God. So here's the acronym then to help us remember these 5 primary precepts. Power. Now, there is absolutely no need to show the examiner how you remember this acronym. This is for you. This is not for the examiner. But so that you know you've included all the right 5 precepts, if you remember the acronym of power, you will hopefully remember the right ideas. So the first precept is to preserve life. There is the P, which enables you to remember. Okay, P for preserve life. Second one is order society, O. Okay. Third one is W, worship God. Fourth is to educate, E, to educate. And the 5th one is to reproduce, R, to reproduce. It's a good idea to try and include them in the essay in this order, just for the purposes of remembering them and getting them down in the right order. But please don't be tempted to tell the examiner about it, as I've said before. As examiners within our department, we see people talking about the acronym, and of course it wastes your time and you don't get marks for talking about it. What you will get marks for is detailing what each of these 5 precepts mean. because of course just listing them like it is on the screen at the moment doesn't really help us. So, the very first one, preserve life. Divine law displays the fact that we are expected to preserve life. In Exodus it tells us, it's consistent throughout the Bible, that it is humans' command by God that we shouldn't kill each other. And really, if we think about it, we can say our creative nature seems to demonstrate that we have this innate need to preserve our own lives, and logic dictates that we must do this or we die out. So it seems to be reasonable, to be rational, that we preserve life. Secondly then, the O in power, order society. Again, divine law dictates this. Mitzvot are the laws that, or commands given in the whole of the Old Testament to the Hebrew prophets. And these laws are to order our society. So God clearly requires us to do this. We can also mention that our human nature is, as herd animals, to live together into communities, and reason therefore dictates that it is practical for us to order these communities so that we can work together and live together. They function best if we do this. So the third precept, the W in power, worship God. Again, divine law commands this. Now, okay, the atheist may argue that reason doesn't require it, that reason does not dictate that we must worship God. But Aquinas would point out that right reason does require us to revere that which caused us to be, which we are designed to return to. So if this being created us and requires us to be in a right relationship with him, it is necessary for us to worship God in order to do this. To educate, the E in power. Now reason again requires that we educate in order for the other precepts to be met. Otherwise the young would not be able to fulfill their purpose because they wouldn't know how to, they wouldn't know what was required of them. So it is necessary for us to do this according to right reason. And of course we know that whilst some revealed knowledge is contained in the Bible, not everything that ever needs to be known by us is in there. And so we need reason in order to establish our purpose, and people need to be educated in order to be able to use right reason, so they don't reason wrongly. And finally, the R in power, reproduce. Now, divine law again commands this. Right at creation, we're told that we must be fruitful and multiply. Our natural created order requires it. This is what sex is for, says Aquinas, because that's the only way that the sperm and the egg will meet. It is the only way, through sex, that we can make sure that the human race continues. And this appears to be what the human genitals are for. This is what their function is. And so if this is the created function of those things, then it is right that we use them for that function. So this brings us on to the secondary precepts. We're going to question on the precepts unless it specifically says only primary precepts, which is unlikely. You should expect to have to talk about secondary precepts too. The advice from examiners is that you actually talk about secondary precepts as you go along, as an example of how to apply the primary precepts. You can talk about secondary precepts at the end, but when candidates tend to do this, they then shortchange the secondary precepts and they don't talk about them enough. So it's better as you go through the primary precepts to then give an example of these secondary ones. Now what the secondary precepts are is much more practical advice about how to apply the primary precepts. They are very much more flexible than the primary. The primary, we said, were absolute. Now, it would be a bit of an error to say that these are relativist We've got to be careful about that. But on the other hand, they are contextual. They depend on the situation as to whether or not you apply them in one way or another. They give very specific instruction within that situation about what you are supposed to do, but they cannot break a primary precept, and they cannot contradict divine or eternal law. Now I'll give you an example. If we look at the primary precept to preserve life, then we need to know exactly what that means and in what context that is appropriate. Now, the most obvious secondary precept derived from preserving life is do not murder, but we can take it a step further. If we say that the primary precept is to preserve life, then this leads on to us to say, well, we must not abort the unborn because the unborn is still life. We cannot commit euthanasia because a dying person is still alive, and so it's not acceptable to hasten their death. Equally, no suicide, because suicide is not the preservation of life. So all of those things would be forbidden under the primary precepts. So that demonstrates to us how we are to apply the primary precepts, and in an examination you should therefore be able to go through each of the primary precepts, demonstrating what kinds of secondary precepts might be necessary in order to make sure you fulfill the primary. And by fulfilling the primary, we therefore achieve our final cause to do good, avoid evil, and achieve fellowship with God.